Good evening. Welcome to the Bradford County Historical Society. And we have you packed in like sardines tonight. Our online auction is coming up. If you haven't heard about that, if you're members, there was an ad in the recent issue of the Settler magazine. But if you're not aware of that, there's also a poster out here on the door and one in the lobby. You can learn about that, or you can go on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and learn about it there. And so it's a little fundraising effort we're doing this fall, and hopefully that'll support the work of the Historical Society. So we've already been setting up tables in the back there, and people have been donating things to the auction. And you'll see a list on the poster out there of the kinds of things that will be in there, but it includes small antiques, collectible books, local history books, handmade things, gift baskets, local experiences, services, and many other things. So it'll be all online, and you'll bid on there over a period of 3 weeks. So if you're interested in that, there's a website listed on the poster out there, or again, on our Facebook page, you can find that and get registered in order to do that. And of course, everything benefits the Historical Society. Also right now going on, our annual appeal campaign that we do once a year has been happening. And if you want to contribute to that, you can do it right through our website. It's the easiest way to do it. Right on the front of the website is a button that'll allow you to be able to do that, or you can, of course, mail that in too, and that helps to pay for things like these programs. This programming series is not sponsored by anyone but the people who come here and use our facility. So when you give a donation to the annual appeal, it really helps with our work here. And also coming up is our annual meeting on October 7th at 3 o'clock. If you're interested in our annual reports of what has happened over the last year, you're welcome to attend that as well. And the museum is open till the end of September, and then it's tours by appointment. If you're interested in that, Tom is able to schedule appointments with you into the fall, so we can still handle that. Tonight's program is called Weather Events That Shaped Bradford County History, and our speaker is Rich Gulyas, who's Mount Pisgah State Park Environmental Education Specialist, and also has recently been added to the board of the Bradford County Historical Society. So we're pleased to have him here tonight to speak to us, and he will come at this time.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it there. Hopefully you'll find this entertaining with winter coming on here a little bit. I brought along a sled up there. I know Dick Allen and I were talking about that. How many of you remember using sleds? Okay. Anybody use them anymore? You don't see that too often. Now they're collectible. Anyway, we will talk about that. Ironically, one of the things I found while doing research was they judged winners on how bad they were by the number of sledding days. So kind of interesting there. You don't see that in the paper anymore. So a lot of changes through time with that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that too. So the reason I'm not a weather expert by any means, and it's not my thing, and everybody's heard the phrase rabbit hole. Okay, so I went down one. I was doing research on wildlife and Native Americans, and I know if you were here last year, I did a presentation on Native Americans in the county. But anyway, while doing that research, I kept coming up with historical weather events. So it was kind of interesting. Some of the ones are pretty significant. You don't often think about those. We all remember the big snowstorm not too long ago. I think it was 2020 or so. So that was a major snowstorm, you know, and ironically, I don't think there was any events that kind of topped that when I went back through the history book. So we all lived through that and saw that. So that was pretty significant. I remember my wife's here, that's why I'm pointing to her back there. But we told our daughter, I remember telling her, you'll never see it snow like this again. So I guess never say never is my whole point with this, because we all know how this could happen. So. And when too. So what I'm going to try to do is go through a bunch of different types of weather events, and some of the terminology you'll see is definitely significantly different. There's some youth there and sledding there, so I had to throw that picture in there, so it looks like they're having fun. So sledding days were important there. A couple things to ponder and stuff we don't often think about. I came across the phrase tornadoes, cyclones, not so much heavy winds, but definitely tornadoes and cyclones. So what's the difference? Pretty much the same. It's just a different region, actually. And cyclones, typically you think of, the National Weather Service now designates them as being, I think, out towards the Pacific Northwest up there. You've all heard of typhoons, which I didn't run across any of those. And where do you think of when you think of typhoons? Japan, yeah, that's the first thing that came to mind there. So, but anyway, cyclones today, we don't call them cyclones, but back in the 1800s, a lot of the settlers called things either tornadoes and cyclones. We call a lot of things heavy winds, shear winds, things like that today. And there's a lot of terminology that, what's the bomb cyclone, all that kind of stuff you hear about, you know. So a lot terminology has changed. Deep snows, what I want you to think about is the people that were living at this time period too. If you got a deep snow, did it affect your lives? Absolutely. You depended on, in some cases, wildlife for survival, different, you know, deer and things like that for food supplies. Maybe even the very light you use, the tallow and things like that that came from candles. So if you couldn't get wildlife, that really affected your life. And a lot of the settlers were pretty much stuck out in the woods for months. They couldn't get out during certain time periods. However, there were also other time periods when, guess what? There was no snow. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, so, you know, weather events do change. I always think, you know, you hear the stories, the snow was, you know, 10 foot deep and up over your head both ways, up the hill and all that kind of stuff. But so anyway, times do change, and I think they experienced similar weather patterns that we did too. Late frost, early frost, same thing. Imagine the crops got wiped out. When I tell you, and I'm not going to steal my own thunder, but later on you'll see some time periods they had frost that completely wiped out crops. So that affected not only this time, you know, that immediate presence there too, trying to get ready for fall and winter, let's say, but also the following year. You had nothing to feed livestock. So it really made a significant impact. Technology and communication, that changes all the time. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the worse. But a lot of, like when I was starting to look into NOAA weather reports, National Weather Service, things like that, they discredited a lot of early reports because there was a lack of technology. So now, obviously it's not hard to measure how deep the snow is. So I'm just wondering, you know, now they have staff gauges on the river, all sorts of fancy weather equipment. I look at radar. So back then, did anybody look at the radar coming across on a map? Didn't happen. So technology has definitely changed. Lightning versus electrical storms. Is there a difference? What do you think? No. There isn't. Same thing. So basically, you'll see references in some of the early books I looked at. They had a horrific lightning storm or an electrical storm. They're basically the same thing. It's just different terminology. Today, you really don't hear anything about electrical storms anymore. So, floods. They had something called the Great Pumpkin Flood. I'll mention later on too. So, what I noticed, they like to name floods. You know, we hear now, you know, everybody remembers Hurricane Agnes and what happened. It's not Hurricane Agnes flooding or flood. It was just Hurricane Agnes. Another one was Tropical Storm Lee, which we'll talk about a little bit there too. So today the terminology's changed, a lot of things like that. So, but kind of put your mind in that mindset of that time period. I'll try to highlight some of the stuff. They used to grow corn and pumpkins together as a crop. So the Great Pumpkin Flood, what do you think happened? Floated away. They said the whole river, the whole valley down through here was covered with floating pumpkins. So, and they used to feed pumpkins to livestock back then. It wasn't for carving pumpkins or decorating your houses. So, so it was, lots of changes take place. So, noteworthy weather events. So I'm going to look at stuff basically from the 1800s till the present. And I'm just going to try to focus more on the 1800s here. Try to look at these different categories: flooding, snowfall, temperature, hail, tornadoes, lightning, electrical storms, and frost, ice. And in the end, you'll be amazed when I tell you about a certain meteorite that hit Bradford County too. So non-weather event, if you could find it, you'll be very rich, but no one's found it. So anyway, all right, history of flooding in Pennsylvania. So the main branch of the Susquehanna River, it's flooded 48 times. that they kept records since 1786. So, and then there's a list of dates with significant flooding events. And I'm sure we've all seen flooding on the Susquehanna. Happens for a variety of reasons, too. It's not only just heavy rainfall. What else can cause flooding? Ice. There's a lot of ice jams, all right? And there was some reports of early ice jams on the river. Remember, they used to float logs down the river. Not all of them made it down to Williamsport. And they would plug up certain spots, and then ice would build up behind those areas, too. So, and you know, it caused maybe localized flooding, but not maybe significant flooding throughout the whole watershed there. So 2 questions. What was the largest recorded flood event in PA? I gave you 4 dates there. What do you think? We got the whole thing there. Guess what? If this pointer works, we'll find out. 72. What flood was it? Agnes. Very good. That was the largest flood on the river. So. Second largest flood, 211. So right there. So what was it? It was Tropical Storm Lee, all right, which I can't even remember. Any of you remember Tropical Storm Lee? Okay, good. So yeah, that's always surprised me there with those 2. So, okay, flooding. I apologize. Some of these are pretty small here on this particular slide. So just a little note. Rainfall, snowfall, melt sometimes combines to cause flooding events. I remember leaving work one day trying to get home, and basically we had real warm temperatures, and we had a pretty good snowpack. I think it was 94 or something like that. But anyway, all the snow melted overnight. Woke up in the morning, the ground was bare. It caused major flooding up here with just that amount of runoff. And then if you get a little bit of rain on top of that. Flood crest, we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you look down just through that list, I listed the heights of the flood crest, so 33 feet, 30, 27, 25, 25. Just to give you a reference, how high is this ceiling here? Anybody know? 22 feet. Every one of those flood events is over that. So picture yourself sitting down by the river and you have that much over your head. That's a lot. Okay, I remember years ago doing an inspection actually along the river, and the person said it never flooded, and there were corn stalks about 15 feet up high jammed up in a tree. Well, they didn't get there magically. It was a flood there. So anyway, you know, these are just some of the bigger events. Again, Hurricane Agnes, Tropical Storm Lee, Hurricane Eloise, and those were really watershed wide, not just localized right here in this spot. So there you can see an early picture of Athens, and downtown Athens was notorious for flooding. So they had a lot of issues. Comes with flooding too. I know probably a lot of us live up in the hills and don't have to worry about that, but I remember talking to one farmer up that way. He helped a lot of people clean mud out, and he said there was up to a foot or more of mud in there. So imagine shoveling through that. A lot of businesses were destroyed and things like that. So this is real close to here. Anybody know where? Yeah, so there's the courthouse. So there you can see the water just starting to get up into there. Ironically, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, they have floodplain maps, and based on runoff events, they have basically there's a 100-year flood, a 500-year flood, a 1,000-year flood. So they have elevations marked out, and that's why you hear about people having to get flood insurance and things like that. So I'd imagine the river probably went up higher than that there too, but you could see, you know, it's getting close to the courthouse there. I know a lot of records are stored up in the top, and where do you store your records? You're up on the hill here. Tom's back there shaking his head. They're all over. So anyway, 1771. Rose an unprecedented height, inundating Ulster and Wyalusing. So those early records, that's all you had. They didn't tell you how many feet it was. It was just a major flood. So river was 6 to 10 feet, and the Pumpkin flood above normal. So what's normal? So they do have what a normal stream flow should be these days. So it's an ordinary water height is what they're basically calling it. And back then, I doubt they had that designated. So, but still 6 to 10 feet above normal, or you know, let's say this is probably getting a little on the dry side now with the river, but it's pretty significant there. There's a lot of terminology that I found too called the freshet. What's a freshet? Yeah, it was a spring flood. It's basically so that's what they called them back then, freshets, early freshets, things like that. So yes, it was that surge at that time period there too. So March 14th and 15th, nearly all bridges on the river and streams washed away from flooding. Picture that. Now what are we doing today? We engineer bridges now. Now, in fact, I worked for the government for years, and I know Tom did too, and you know, one of the things, the common statements was, an elephant is a mouse engineered to government specifications. So that I remember we bought a hammer years ago, just to give you an idea on prices, and that hammer, until everybody signed off and approved it, was $75. So, inflation, right? But anyway, so times have changed too, but basically our bridges now, structural integrity is really important. Back then, of course, they built a lot of bridges out of wood, and even the Susquehanna River, some of the early reports I read, it was about half the width that it is now. So, and I heard over, you know, years of doing stream inspections too, I used to be able to jump across that stream. Well, now you look at them and they're 20 feet across. There's no way you're jumping that far. So I do believe, you know, things do change over time in the size of things. But you'll see down through there, there's the great June flood, you know, the June 1st and 2nd there. 1901, 5 people drowned due to destructive flooding, millions of dollars in property damage. So it's definitely has impacted this area and caused major problems. We've also had significant droughts. And right now, I do believe it's getting very dry. If you've been out working in your yard, or garden, anywhere, or farming or anything like that, ground is terribly dry right now, even though it just seems like we'd had all sorts of rain this year. So it doesn't take long to turn the tide, I guess, there. So anyway, 1879, last day in May, temperature was 94 degrees. So, and you can see some temperature drought conditions from August through November. So wells, springs, small streams dried up, many fires reported. So it, again, did affect a lot of lives. Drought from the first week in July to October 13th. So amazing, lowest point in 41 years on the Susquehanna River. I could imagine what that looked like at that time period. But any kind of crops, corn, buckwheat, as they mentioned in there, everything was pretty much destroyed. I know we took a trip up into up along the Great Lakes, and there was one area up there where they were having a real severe drought, basically killed all the trees. So you could imagine what kind of impact that would have. 1910, March, the driest month ever remembered, you know. So those are some of those reports and books like that. And there's a lot of records here in the Historical Society too. Hail, pretty amazing. And many destructive hailstorms this summer. Those were some of the statements. So how do you grade hail? We see all sorts of stuff. I brought along some props here. So imagine getting hit by a hailstorm that size. And it's happened recently, okay? The largest hail that recorded is actually bigger than a softball. It's about the size of a large grapefruit. So this is about 4 inches across. So this would be severe hail. And if you look down through that, 1877, crops along Wyalusing Creek destroyed by hail the size of a hen's egg. So everybody knows how big an egg is. I didn't bring an egg along, I brought along a golf ball. Okay, so a hen's egg is a little bit bigger than a golf ball there. But could you imagine that hitting you? It's amazing. I'm going to pass some of these pictures around. Feel free to take a look at them here. This is just some pictures of hail and hail damage. And please feel free to just pass those along there when you're done. So, but yeah, along there, hail measured 30 inches deep along one fence row in Wyalusing. Now I was doing some research on weather reports, and there's such a thing as a hail drift. We've all heard of snow drifts. They had a hail drift. So I suspect maybe at that time period, that's what they were looking at. I would imagine a lot of this, you know, blows around, moves around there and builds up, but still, even if it was 10 inches of hail on a crop field, it would totally destroy it, or your garden and, of course, houses, things like that, too. So 1882, hailstorm and a tornado in the southern half of County. It destroyed several buildings, uprooted trees. Hail was the size of a hen's egg again. And then lastly, on the bottom, you see terminology change too over time. So up in the top, 1853, I highlighted destructive. Imagine that, it's real destructive. As you go through time and you see that with history, terminology changes, they kind of glorify things. So furious hailstorm. So, and you see that on weather reports too these days. Everybody likes watching the news and things, so I think that sells news. So anyway, but small hen's egg, I'm not sure what that means by that, but I guess you could grade eggs then and things like that. So anyway, amazing hailstorm. I was in a hailstorm on a motorcycle one time wearing a t-shirt. Ouch. And basically the size of the hail was about the size of, like a dime here. So picture going down the highway, 55, and this is coming out of the air hitting you. I had welts all over me. It hurt very bad. So picture this coming down, hitting you, okay? Yeah, that would hurt real bad there, so take cover, all right? So they base hail on the size of the projectiles, if you want to call them that, coming down. So they have a whole grade of hail. It starts off with stuff like a dime, it goes to a penny, nickel-size hail, quarter-size hail. Then it gets into the severe category, which is, golf ball size more or less, and this would be very severe. So anyway, they still use some of that terminology today there for that. But you could imagine some of these reports weren't even recorded back then too, in different spots. Here's some of the snowfalls, and if you look down in there, everybody remembers 2020 there, December 17th. Some parts of the county saw over 40 inches of snow. So just to give you an idea, brought a long tape measure. So memory time here, so all right, so where's a good spot to set that? Up here, there's about 40 inches of snow right where my phone is. So I remember up on our deck, it went up about waist deep here, so pretty deep, a lot of snow shoveling. Tractors didn't work. Yeah, tractors didn't work real well in this, yeah. I remember the neighbor coming over, you could have borrowed my skid steer after I got done. So anyway, but some of the things that's amazing, you look at that 1807, March 31st, heavy snow, 4 to 5 foot deep. That's in March, all right? And it caused a flood, of course, too, when it all melted there. 1836, October 5th. It's not too far from October 5th right now. 2 feet of snow fell, all right? So 1844, over 2 feet of snow fell on what date? September 29th, even closer there. So these things can happen. But then you also have winters like 1853, total absence of snow. And it goes back to sledding days too. Now, sledding wasn't that good that year. So which brings up to, I did look at some of the school cancellations. How many of you remember being let out of school early or the day was off? Okay. Probably a lot more snow than you saw today. Okay. All right. School gets shut down. I see some people smiling. My wife's a teacher, so she likes it. So anyway, but a little bit of snow will shut down school day. It's a safety issue. It really is. What they reported, like these huge snow drifts in those winters right there, I got that out of a SARE report up there, and they're 15-foot high drifts, closed schools. Yeah, I guess it would. You couldn't get into the school back then. So anyway, and I know a couple of my neighbors told me about, basically, even though they didn't get a lot of snow, they got some heavy drifts, and they couldn't get equipment, they couldn't get any kind of school buses, things out, stuff like that. So that would, of course, affect a lot of people. In the one picture there, maple sugaring, there was one report there, March 27th, snow so deep the sugar makers couldn't gather sap. So that was with snowshoes, too, on it. So you could imagine trying to, where they tapped the trees, the taps were all buried from what I read there. So again, it did affect a lot. That was up in Ithaca, that top picture right up there. So I don't know if they ever did get that snow off that car there, though. But so anyway, okay, tornadoes and cyclones. First one, read that. Mind-boggling. 1842, 3-mile wide tornado. picture that. 3 miles wide. I mean, that'd be, if it hit Towanda, it'd take out the whole town. All right, so, and luckily at that time, things weren't all that developed there, so passed over southeastern part of the county, leveling forests, scattering fences, destroying buildings, crops. So that's amazing, that wide there at that point. Most of the tornadoes that we see in the Midwest and things like that don't even come close to that. They're less than a mile wide. There's another one, path was a half-mile wide up in Ridgebury there. Destructive storm with heavy winds and rain. Anyway, cyclones, they did talk about those, even though we know they're not here, but destroyed woods, buildings in Vroman Hill. Tornadoes and hail. Athens greatly damaged by a furious windstorm. So who knows if that was a tornado or not. And then numerous destructive electrical storms there too. So there's one, a cyclone hit near Springfield, unfortunately killed 2 men and several cattle. So several reports like that. Now the other thing you got to think about too, back then, if you had several cattle, that was a lot. So most of the early settlers had 1 or 2 cattle on their farms or their houses, things like that. So they're very precious commodity. That's where you got all your milk from. If you lost them, you really suffered from that. So very, important part of your life. So electrical lightning storms, this is very sad. I'd hate to get struck by lightning. We've all heard about that, but there's a guy's name, Uriah Phillips of Smithfield Township. He was cultivating corn. He got struck. Next one, a little girl was struck up by lightning up in Armenia Mountain there. Fortunately, she did survive. So, but we've all had lightning strikes close to our house and things like that, and it can be very traumatic there too. So, I would suspect, with global warming issues like that, the frequency is going to increase. There's reports that the size of hail is going to increase over time too. And it all ties back into science with updrafts and, things like that too. So more development, more heat rising up of paved surfaces, things like that. So here's a good one, 1895, terrific thunderstorm hits East Towanda Fairgrounds. Blowing down several tents. You could imagine being at a fair and this happened. And lightning killed 4 horses. Amazingly, no one was injured. So. Okay, frost and ice. These things are incredible as well, too. So 1816, 1859, heavy killing frost every month of the year. Every month. Now think about that. Why? If I had $1 million, I'd give it to you. What do you think? It's a volcano. Wasn't Krakatoa, though. Okay. No. There was 2 volcanoes, though. I can't pronounce the one begins with a T in Indonesia. Tawua or something like that, and then the other one was in Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa was the second one in 1859. They said that lasted for over 300 days, the eruptions and different things. So what would wind up happening with both of those, you had a significant amount of ash going up, would block the sunlight out, and it lowered the temperature by only about half a degree and worldwide, but it killed literally thousands and thousands of people, and a lot of people starved too as well from that. So imagine if something like that happened today. Where's most of our crops coming from? We get a lot of food around here, but where do you think most crops come from? Actually, California is one of the biggest producers of farm products. You don't even think about that. Where's all the Ring of Fire? Right there. So hopefully it never does happen, but we may be setting ourselves up for failure here. So anyway, June 2nd, killing frost, corn froze to the ground, and apple crops were destroyed. Apples were also a very important commodity for a lot of farmers there too, and also for a lot of people too. A lot of northern spies were grown back then. They'd last longer. They could preserve them and store them longer there too. So you could imagine losing those. But again, June 2nd, a killing frost. May 30th, another killing frost. So how many of you plant your gardens before May 30th? Yeah, I'm guilty of that. So anyway, they do have set up tables now. Basically, the safe time to plant a garden is after May 30th. Guess why? So Okay, 1855, late ice break up on the river. People crossed the river on sleighs in Towanda up till April 6th. So imagine crossing over that river back then, too. So, July 4th, there's a good one. Frost and ice, and even reports of snowfall on July 4th. Just amazing. And June 14th, killing frost, the ice was a 1/4 inch thick. So, June 6th, frost and ice. September 30th, a killing frost. So some of the things that you read about, you kind of take them for granted, but you know, I'm sure it really did happen back then. There's June 2nd, 1843, corn frozen to the ground and fruit crops were destroyed. We also had warm spells too with temperature, of course. So that first one there, basically it's a typo there when I typed this up, but anyway, they had a warm spell, somewhere between 90 to 103 degrees for 16 consecutive days. So, and they doubt they had air conditioners back then, so you can imagine what it was like there. So, just going down through those, the coldest day on record, 1904. Look at the temperatures there, 25 to 40 degrees below zero. Wow. So we're fortunate too, I guess, so from some standpoints there. So. Okay, and I'm going to end with this here. Meteorite. Has nothing to do with weather, but anyway, there was a meteorite that fell. It was back in the 1800s. A 150-pound meteorite fell in Troy. Current value, if it was a cheap meteorite, it'd be about $2 per gram. If it was a really sought-after meteorite, type of metal basically in it, it's about $1,000 a gram right now in today's terms. So I did some math there. It's somewhere between 136,000 all the way up to $68 million. So now everybody could go out and look for that meteorite, right? Okay, if you find it and it's one of those rare ones, let me know. I'll be your best friend. What's that? The date on that was, I don't have the exact date on that. Matt, do you recall that at all? I know there's records on it, but forgot to put that date. It was definitely in the 1800s there. So it's probably sitting out in some fence row right now. And somebody dragged it out of a field and there it sits, or a house is built next to it. So, but anyway, you know, amazing. The 1819, October 23rd, darkness so great pioneers had to light their oil lamps or pitch pine knots during the day. I could not find if there was a volcano or anything related to that. But could you imagine getting that dark, maybe an eclipse? But you know, of course, computers are wonderful things there. You can learn a lot on there today. But there was no significant eclipse, anything like that at that time. So I don't know why that happened. Look at that, 1840, most corn in tassel by July 4th. So what's the old saying, knee high by 4th of July? It was in tassel already. So the month of March had only 3 days of sunshine in 1841. January 1st broke all heat records. First day of the year, plowing was done in January. In February, oats sown in March, very fruitful year, I guess it was. So, and then 1915, latest haying date. They're done haying right now. They're chopping corn right now. Look at the latest haying date, December 1st. So amazing from that standpoint. And 1920, of course, the year of the big apple crop. Thousands of bushels went to waste. They said they dumped them over the banks and just let them rot because there were so many apples. So there's a lot of apples this year, but I don't think there's quite that many. So anyway, lots of things to think about, ponder. Fortunately, the Historical Society has kept great track of things. One of the references I've used is the history and geography of Bradford County. So if you ever get a chance to read through this book, I did look through two brochures, or binders actually they were, and there's a few of the printouts up there that I put up there and put together by Julie Ann Them, some of the significant weather events there too. So there's a whole list of those, 2 pages of those. So I just tried to pick out some of the highlights for this particular presentation. Cesare Historical Society also has a wealth of information there in their books as well, and I did get some things from the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration too, so more recent records. So, any questions? Yes?
What's the difference now
Yes, me too. I'm still, yeah. Basically, I can't say there's been a lot of significant changes there too. I always pray that our house never gets hit by lightning there. But, you know, years ago you saw a lot more lightning rods up. If you go up into the New England states, there's still a lot of homes up there with lightning rods and different structures like ice guards, things like that. So, you know, climate change may be significant there. You know, if you're going to build a new house, put it by a taller tree so the lightning seems to hit the highest object first, not your house there. So, but yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. I'm sorry. Yeah.
My grandfather was born in 1892, and he says they skated when he lived in Toronto before he's gone. They skated on the river, like the river. They skated over.
Right. Went down through that, and I heard reports of that. I know my wife's father, when I met my wife, he always told me they used to hang deer up and they'd just cut meat off and eat it. They'd salt it. And they could hang it out there for most of the winter. So, but, you know, some of the reports I read, obviously we had warm winters too, and then some real severe cold ones too. So, but yeah, it's amazing to go skating, you know, in that. So last year I wouldn't have gone skating anywhere. So it was so thin. So, but believe it or not, there was quite a few ice fishermen out. I saw people where they put planks out to get to little patches of ice to go ice fishing. So they'd walk across the plank. That's scary. All right, so anyway, but not a way to go there. But any other questions at all? So hopefully, I don't know. What do you think? We're going to have a bad winter, mild winter? Okay, we've got a mixed thing. I used to always tell people if you saw a bad apple crop, you're going to have a bad winter. So we'll see. I've been wrong a lot on that one there. So anyway, what's the woolly bear say? That's a good point there. Anybody ever judge the coming winter by woolly bears? The little caterpillar there? They did a survey of those and they found that they're all different lengths and it means nothing. So yeah, some college did that somewhere there. But anyway, I used to hear paper wasp nests, the higher they are up in the tree, the deeper the snow was. So I don't necessarily believe that there, but maybe they know something we don't know. Early settlers, they used to beaver tails. They would judge how bad the winter was going to be by how thick the fat was on a beaver tail. So that seems to make sense because that beaver had to know something about what's coming. So anyway, but you know, that's how they'd measure it, the thickness of the fat if it was a mild winter. I've seen that with deer. If you skin deer out, some deer hides will have real thick fat on it, and other ones there's hardly anything on it. So you know, I don't know. A lot of things to ponder there, whether they're all true. So some are theories, and I'm sure you have lots more of that. So yeah. Any other questions before we wrap up? Or Matt, do you want to add anything? No? So, all right. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming out, and I always wanted to be a weatherman. So, anyway. And please feel free. I know we don't have probably copies for everyone, but if you're husband and wife, you know, obviously just take one there and read that. There's some real good reading in there too. So thank you all. Thanks. Yes. I was thinking, October, you see some of those snowfalls there. I got hunter safety tomorrow. Yeah, I might bring this up. So, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.